We're going to start off Mental Health Monday today with this. You got your ginger tea? Nice, nice, nice. So there's this quiet pressure most of us carry, kind of that says, like, hey, you should be further along by now. And it's not because someone kind of sat us down and said it to us. It was kind of like this thing that we just absorbed from our environment, and it's like, from timelines that we created on ourselves, milestones from watching other people announcing stuff while we're still figuring out, even from scrolling on TikTok. I mean, shows up when we're scrolling, when someone asks what you've been up to. Um, Quiet pressure, meaning pressure to be successful by your parents. Yeah, or, well, kind of like this, like it's our like our internal voice. Like I've mentioned before on one of these episodes that, we have our inner voice, but it's kind of like, we put our own timelines. Um, and the challenge that we face is trying to stick to those timelines, um, because, uh, when you take a pause, usually, longer than expected, you kind of feel like, hey, I should be done with this by now, that kind of thing. And suddenly the progress that you have made starts to feel invisible or almost insignificant, because you're like, wait, I thought I did more than what I could have done. I should have been further along by now, that kind of thing. Um, and so it kind of puts that block, like your healing starts to slow down. Your rebuilding feels unfinished. So tonight isn't about pushing harder, hustling faster, or trying to catch up to an invisible clock. It's about learning to trust the pace that you're already moving at. Even when it doesn't look like you're making progress, even when it's quiet, um, even when it's taking longer than you thought it would. Yes, Lovey, trust your own journey, because moving slowly doesn't mean you're stuck. Sometimes it means you're just kind of moving with care. I mean, so, you know, this space, as always, you guys, exists for real conversations about mental health, healing, and what it means to keep going, without pretending everything's fine or forcing growth before you're ready. Tonight we're talking about pace, not productivity, not hustle, um, but trusting that your timing isn't wrong. Like, even when it doesn't look like anyone else's. Like, you just got to stop this whole comparison. Thank you for the heart, me. Um, Even when like, we got to stop this whole comparison thing. So before we go any further, let's just check in with where we actually are. So, like, right now, I would say my pace feels a little bit uneven. Like, I would say I'm moving forward, just not in a straight line. Krish, welcome in, welcome in. What's up, what's up? Lovey, you said, is it our timing or God's timing? It's kind of like the timelines that we then put on ourselves, that, it's like, hey, I kind of want to do this by a certain point. And then, if we find that we're getting closer to that point, then we start kind of like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. We didn't do it in the time that we said we were, that kind of thing. So, uh, right now I'd say my pace feels kind of like uneven. Like, I'd say I'm moving forward, just not in a straight line. Some days feel grounded. Um, Hello, Priya. Clear, like I know exactly what I'm doing and why. Yep, Tulsi. Yep, exactly. Stressed because, yeah, that's the thing. Um, so like some days I feel grounded and clear, like I know exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and other days feel kind of heavy, like I'm catching my breath, recalibrating or reminding myself that it's okay to slow down, and I have to remind myself it's not like I'm going backwards. It just kind of feels like movement with slight pauses. Oh, can't see comments. Okay, well, I can move it. Hold on. I can move that down a little bit. Is that better? Because I'm looking at it live here. Move it top right, like over here. There is a limitation because it doesn't higher up. Okay, slightly more up. Okay, like right there. Okie dokies. Thank you, thank you. Much love, family. Um, yeah. So it doesn't. You have to remind yourself that we're not going. There he is, brother Ravi. What's up?
What's up, brother? I'm just listening.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna give my input.
All right. All right. So, kind of just feels like movement with pauses built in, and I think that's something a lot of us experience, but don't always talk about. The part where progress isn't linear, and the back and forth is actually part of staying steady. So we're gonna kind of take a moment to kind of come back into the present. So last episode, we kind of did the breathe in and breathe out. We're gonna kind of do that similar kind of breathe in, and this on the breathe in, just kind of try to reflect on moments where you've been rushing yourself, and on that breath out, try to soften that urgency just even slightly if you can. Like try to minimize how burning of a thought that is, like if you can just kind of just do that a couple of times for some very overwhelming thought that you have and see how that kind of helps. If your mind jumped ahead, that's okay because that's what minds do. You don't have to arrive anywhere tonight. You're kind of already here. That's part of the central theme of tonight. Moments like that are small, but they matter. They remind us that pace isn't just about time. Good night. How's everybody doing? Um, they remind us that pace isn't just about time, it's about safety. Um, and when we don't feel safe, we rush. When we're overwhelmed, we freeze. And when we're healing, we often judge ourselves for not moving fast enough. So tonight, we're not asking how to move faster, we're asking how to trust the pace your nervous system can actually handle. Like basically, we've heard the term burnouts and stuff like that. We're trying to figure out like what is our actual limit without putting a limit, if that makes sense. Um, Most of us were never taught, sorry, to trust our pace, as in we were always taught milestones. Like we were given deadlines that ages that we were supposed to be certain things by, right? So that applied to hey, look at so and so, they're this age, and why you should be more like them. They're doing things leaps and bounds, you're getting there or you're not there yet or something. uh, and that applies over to healing, so when healing, rebuilding, or starting again takes longer than expected, we start feeling that there's something wrong with us, but then we have to remind ourselves that healing doesn't move on a schedule. um, and rebuilding after burnout, loss, or trauma often looks slower than the world expects, right? I mean, because we're going to be taking longer to make certain decisions. We are going to be needing more rest than we used to. I mean, there's going to be moments where we're starting, stopping, and restarting just to recover from what happened. And we're going to be moving forward, but it's not going to be big strides, it's going to be quiet. Um, and these aren't failures, right? These are all signs that we're recalibrating. um and just that whole thing about slowing down, slowing down isn't a flaw. It's often as a way of protecting ourselves. I mean, the simplest analogy I could make in this would be, would you it sucks either way, let's just say, to get hit by a bus, but would you rather get hit by a bus going, let's say, 5 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour? That's the thing. We have to kind of put that mental break. We are always in control of our vehicles, right? But we have to say, like, hey, if there's nowhere else to go, if we're going straight at this wall, do we want to approach it, you know, at full speed, or do we want to approach it cautiously? Um and this is something that I've had to remind myself of a lot. Slow is not the same as being stuck. um, they can feel similar from the outside, but internally they're very different experiences, right? I mean, being stuck, that if we break down the word stuck, it kind of has like this heavy association with it, like we are stuck in the mud, right? We always say, like, I'm stuck in my thoughts, or I'm stuck in something. It kind of has like this tether associated with it, right? There's some form of resistance, or there is disconnection, often in the form of either numbness, frustration. um, but at the end of the day, we feel stuck because there's not much movement. We're stuck in our thoughts. We try to, and being slow, on the other hand, still has motion. uh it just if we look at the clouds, we know they're moving, but everybody's going to say, oh, well, that particular cloud's, moving really fast, but we all know that the earth rotates at a set speed, right? But it's stuff like that. Like, you might be thinking, things through more carefully, and like I said earlier, resting longer than you're used to, that stuff, um but see, and that's the thing. A lot of us learn to equate movement with speed. So when things slow down, thank you for the heart, me. So when things slow down, our brain jumps to the conclusion that we're falling behind because we've slowed down. But slow progress still includes four basic things. It gives us moments to reflect. It allows us to recognize our effort. Um, Obviously, we are very aware of what's going on, and it allows us to solidify our intention. Because in those moments that we slow down, um, and see, here's the thing, those aren't going to disappear just because we technically slow down, right? Those thoughts are there. It's like, I think we rush because we're afraid that if we slow down, we're going to stop progress entirely. Like, if we take our foot off the gas, we don't know how to start up again, so we basically go into coasting mode. Um, but sometimes slowing down is exactly what allows movement to continue, without burnout, without self betrayal without forcing ourselves past our limits, you know? So if you've been moving slower lately, that doesn't automatically mean you're stuck. It might mean you're just taking things just a little bit more cautiously, you know? Like I said earlier, it's often meant as protection, right? You know, just means you're probably going to be listening to things more carefully. You're protecting something that you don't want to obviously have injured, right? So, you know, it might mean you're learning how to move in a way that's sustainable, right? We always look for consistency, something that makes us feel secure, things like that, you know. And so I would say you know, the takeaway from that would be, listen, you don't really need to build momentum to be moving forward. You can coast off of what you've already got. Um, all it needs is a little bit of direction. That's where we reach out to family and try to get a different perspective. You know, at our core, we're all go-getters. You know, we have that mentality that we can't sit still. We like to do something. We always got to, but we don't have a proper direction, right? You know, then we end up spinning our wheels. That's probably the closest analogy I could kind of relate to on this. And so by talking it out, we usually get that alignment, and you know, kind of getting our trains back on track, so to speak. Um, so so if slow isn't the problem, the real question becomes what what are we actually then measuring this pace against, you know, because comparison has a way of distorting time. um, I think a big reason trusting our pace is so hard is because most of us are running against something we can't even see. It's like an invisible clock. um, it's made up of expectations that we picked up over time, no pun intended, where we thought we'd be by now, who we thought we'd be by now, um, what we thought would already be finished. Um, and the thing about that clock is it's not neutral. It's usually being set by our own comparisons, you know, or by other people's timelines, by cultural milestones, by versions of success that don't account for healing, burnout, or rebuilding. So even when you are moving forward, it can still feel like you're not, you know, that you're late, you know. It gets louder when we're scrolling, even, you know. So when somebody's asking, what are you going to be doing next, you know, it's a hard way to answer because we're like, wait, what are they wanting to hear, right? I mean, people are naturally going to assume that you are going to always be moving forward. They don't like to hear, this is the social thing I've picked up over the years, you know, it's like people don't like to hear that you're not making progress. And the unfortunate part about that is progress differs in who's listening, right? I mean, to some people, progress seems like leaps and bounds, but to us, we could be looking at progress like, hey, I didn't do this today. Like, you know, little small wins, but that's the comparison is that, you know, um, you know, then you have to, then it just kind of makes you feel like you're behind. And even if you've been doing some of the hardest work of your life, right? I mean, for me, releasing that clock has meant rem- reminding myself of everything that isn't visible, right? I mean, the healing that nobody saw, right? I mean, the boundaries that took energy to hold. Tulsi says sometimes just getting out of bed is a win. Yes, exactly. Yes. See that's what I'm getting at here is like this pace that we are supposed to be moving at, right? We all have our own limitations, you know. It's not, it could be because we just don't have the motivation to do certain things. But at the same time, it's like, we've got a lot of other things that, we are devoting our energy to. It's like, um, it's because we've put that pace on ourselves. We got to now then sustain it, right? Um, and basically, this clock then that we've created, right? I mean, it's reminded me of everything that isn't visible, right? I mean, so the healing, all this stuff, but it's like that came with timestamps. It's almost like when you're watching a YouTube video, right? You're like, wait, I want to go back to this particular point, or you just keep replaying all of these different, So this would be what I would say, like, trusting my pace looks like, is like measuring myself against my own capacity, right? I mean, you got to be able to say that, all right, I feel like I've got the capacity of a 9-volt battery. If I go above that, I know I'm going to explode, right? I mean, physically there's no way that you can put 12 volts in a 9-volt battery. That's the way you got to do it. If you try to do too much, it's just, you got to know your limits, right? I mean, you're going to blow your top. And that's what leads to burnout and stuff like that, right? The downside about that is when we start looking at, social media in this aspect, when we're scrolling, when we're looking at what other people are doing, it's almost like, hey, I want to do that. I should be able to do that. All of these, we've heard the phrase should have, would have, could have, right? I mean, those are the three things that all of these, as the saying goes, hindsight is 2020 or 2040, however you want to look at it. But the core of that phrase is basically we have these moments where we could have done something or should have done something differently than what we intended, right? And it usually means either going faster than we either were, or like, hey, I could have done this and I would have been done with this by now, that kind of thing. Um, and so I would say the takeaway from this would be, some some chapters, like when you're watching a movie, right? Let's just be honest. I have moments of ADHD. I got to go back several times and be like, listen, I don't think I understood what I actually was watching. That's kind of what we have to do here. Some chapters when we're reading a book, even, right? Like, um, there's no shame in going back and reading it over, because some chapters take longer because it takes longer for us to understand the meaning. Um, it just takes longer for the meaning to take effect. Um, so I'm gonna ask if you guys want to go ahead, and at this point, it's been 30 minutes. I'd like to kind of, tonight might be a little bit of a short. What's going on in the comments here? You guys are more than welcome to join in if you want. This is gonna probably be a little bit of a shorter episode than you guys are used to. I think because this particular topic I was a little bit skeptical about, because it, to me, initially seemed a little bit similar to what I previously was talking about. But it's one of those, that need, one of those things that does need to be reminded of, because it's like when we put these timelines, it kind of forces us to kind of just do things rushed. I mean, we know, like, we've all worked for a corporation at some point. When we get these deadlines, it's like, whoa, 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 I can't do it. But we know what works for us at the end of the day. So um, as we close tonight, I want to leave you guys with something to reflect on. Not to just puzzle your brains with. And I say that, uh, like, something in my book, that I was thinking about the other day. The idea that surviving, rebuilding, and continuing forward don't always look impressive from the outside, right? We're always going to be looking at progress as like, it could be better. This is nothing. This is just the worst thing, but that's the perspective change, right? um a lot of what we carry doesn't come with timestamps. We don't have to announce anything. We don't have to get a public award, I mean, to us it's still something that we can chalk off as work, and we have to make that association that what we actually did is progress. So instead of measuring yourself by how fast you're moving, maybe the question becomes something gentler, like, can I acknowledge what I've already lived through and still allow myself to move forward at my own pace? Instead of asking how fast you're moving, ask yourself, what's one area of your life where you could allow yourself to slow down? Um, or what would you change if you stopped comparing your pace to somebody else? These things, I feel like we kind of have those hindsight moments. And we don't have to catch up to anybody else, right? We don't have to outrun our healing, so to speak. You know, the ability to still show up in any form. Your pace is doing exactly what it needs to do, right? Um, and yes, exactly, Shavang. That is the best way to summarize this here is that life is not a sprint. Um, we all move at our own pace, and we have to learn to accept it, because again, there's always going to be people that are going to going to say something or critique us and be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Like, you know, even even if you're trying to do the most simplest thing, as far as, just trying to get out of bed, it would be like, "Hey, hold up, why aren't you getting out of bed faster?" Like, I didn't know there was multiple ways to get out of bed. I get out of bed my way. Like, I mean, please entertain me
Exactly.
if there's but exactly, right?
Yeah,
It's these
bro.
little thoughts that come in my head, and I like to then share with you guys, because I feel like we've all had these at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
like for instance, bro, it's like I just realized the topic itself it moved at its own pace. Like this topic, it was going at its own pace. You didn't set a time limit or a timeline. It went to its own pace because I'm here. What do you mean, man? So what do you mean? Where am I? I'm here.
Raul, yeah, brother, what you said.
Yes, because it's like think about it this way. It's like, oh, you guys want to see me? No, I gotta give Rahul. He has to shine. You just guys gonna hear me, but this is his time to shine. So I'm not gonna take any away from him. But like you said, bro, it's like with when it comes to the pace, it's like imagine you going at your own pace, but along the way you learn so much. Because imagine you rise to the top and within a week or so, but you haven't learned anything. You haven't learned what it is. How do I get to the top? And then you come crashing down. But as you take your own pace, then you learn step by step what it is to brick by brick build. You build yourself up. So that way it may be a struggle at first, and people may not see it. But then look at the end result. The journey is going to be beautiful, but when you reach to that destination. So just my little tidbit there.
No, very true.
We'll
It's
go.
like we get caught in that mentality, when we look at other people, we're like, "Hey, I want to move a little bit faster. I want to do this." And usually that faster mentality means we end up rushing through. We skip steps, like Shanti mentioned. If we rush through things, we'll miss some steps. We see these things happen on those those baking shows, right? It's a competition, right? I get it. The purpose is to be the best under pressure, but it's like there's always something that's going on. It's like, hey, I got to do this faster. I got to do this because I have a timeline. And because I have a timeline, I have to, if I wanted this to be a 5-star product, it may be a 3.5-star product because now I had to do it under pressure. You see that kind of thing. Um, so unfortunately, I would say the condition though is we aren't given full control of our paces. Sometimes it is doctored in, like let's say for example on these types of shows, the same thing exists in corporate worlds. We have deadlines that we have to adhere to, but we have the ability to sync our paces to those deadlines, right? I mean, we know what works for us under regular conditions, but what we can do is basically break it down into segments, right? So let's say if we know in 10 minutes we are able to perform this task and it's the most perfect thing. Now we have to be able to relate that to how we'd be able to do it under pressure. We can do the same steps, but of course, it's not going to be done in that, so we have to skip a few steps, but that's where skipping a few steps comes in handy. That's where we create shortcuts. Shortcuts aren't necessarily, I don't want to say skip, it is skipping steps, but it's in a way that you're not, um, you're not cheating per se. Like I would say you're taking you're taking smaller decisions. That's why I would say it's a shortcut because your destination is still the same. Exactly. It's being strategical about the steps you're taking, small steps versus big steps. Your destination is the same, but it allows you to, instead of take 2 steps to cross that hurdle, you may now need one. Exactly. So you can get to your destination a little sooner. Thank you. Um, and really that's basically the I'd say the entirety of this. That summarizes pace, I think, um, and how it applies to our daily lives because we keep trying to adjust it too, right? I mean, if we keep saying, hey, we got to keep going faster or slower, faster, slower, I mean, the other analogy I can give is it ruins your fuel efficiency, right? If you're looking at it in a car, you've got an 8-hour trip and you want to get there in 6 hours. How are you going to do that? You've basically got to go damn near 80 miles per hour all the time. And still your average speed is not going to be 80 miles per hour because there's going to be traffic, there's going to be obstacles in the way, there's going to be something that's going to slow you down, right? Uh, but we know that we are capable of only going this speed, right? If we do any more than that, then we're either going to cause an accident in this scenario, or we're going to blow out a tire, or we're going to do something that's going to slow us down even further. And so that's where I'm going to wrap this up here tonight because I want you guys to think about this a little bit. Is like, where are those small moments where like, you guys have rushed into things and, needed to slow down and just be like, how about I had approached this a little bit differently? What if I had maybe instead of doing two things, if I had just done a little bit more, that extra step may have been the difference between how it turned out versus how it could have been, that kind of thing. Um, and as always, guys, these episodes are available on YouTube if you guys missed it or are just joining in. And these are also eventually going to be um, in podcast form. I'm going to be taking this probably either to Spotify or Apple Music. So um, these will be available on the go as well. Um, but yeah, you guys, we'll be back at it again next Monday here. And thank you guys, as always, for the love and support that you guys show me on Mental Health Mondays. Can't really do this show without you guys. So, um,
Yeah, thank,
yeah.
I thank you,
Um,
brother, for yeah, this is a beautiful topic, and I'm glad you brought this up. And it's something that we need to focus on because a lot of times it's like we don't think about it. We always trying to grab and trying to run up to the top, and but we can come crashing out. So it's a very very great topic, and always doing a good job. Very proud of you, brother, and love you so much.
love
And
to
I know I
everybody.
speak for
Thank you
minutes
all
as
for
well.
stopping in. And like I
Yeah.
said, we'll see you all tomorrow in Brother Ravi's live for Monday.
Take care, guys.
All right, you guys. Take care. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Rahul.